Okay, it's 8:30 p.m. and it's Thursday, January the 27th, 2020, and welcome to week number 8 of Contemporary Issues in Criminal Justice. I'm Professor Richard Wright, and I'll be with you for the next half an hour or so, giving you details for week 8's assignment, and I'll cover some comments about week 9 as well. So let's get right to sharing the screen. Okay. So you can see we have one more lecture left, and that will be week 10. And then the course ends, in week 11. So you got week 1, week 3, and week 6, which is open house, weeks 3 and 6 down below. Okay, let's take a look at the announcement for the week. So what we're going to talk about today is gaining real-world experience. And then Module 8, and then the discussion assignment, fieldwork issues and experiences. Initial posts were due a couple nights ago, Tuesday night, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. And then your reply posts are due 11:59 p.m. Central Standard on Saturday. Finally, you complete the written assignment, field work progress report. This is the one, that's the second one. Remember week 5 you had one, and some of you did not complete a field work progress report. Some of you just gave a summary of the classes. You got zeros, and I explained why. Okay. And then, because it was explained from week 1 that you had to do a 10-hour field work in a field, in an area, and that was a requirement set from week 1 for this particular course. And then you know what my motto is all about. So let's take a look at the course calendar. This is where we are today, and tells you we have the lecture today, and then your reply post is due Saturday. Your initial post was due the 25th. Then this is what the module. Don't worry about this. Read chapters 15 and 16. That's been in there since the beginning. There's no textbook in this course. And then your field work, that's your written assignment, a 1 to 2 page report explaining where you are within the process. Make sure you do it APA, and it should be a minimum of 1 to 2 pages, not counting the reference page. But you need citations and references. Okay. And then that's due the 1st of March. And then next week, preparing for employment in the field, importance of a resume. And that's what your initial post is all about next Tuesday, and your reply post. And then you can see this is week 10. That's when we do our next live lecture and final live lecture. Okay. And the course ends on the 20th. Okay. So now let's look at the assignments again with the rubric. Once again, a 1 to 2 page progress report on your field work experience. It makes it quite clear. Field work experience. Explain where you are in the process, what you completed, and your plan for the remainder of the term. Be sure to include how some current event or trend within criminal justice has influenced your fieldwork experience. Here is the rubric showing the due date. And again, if you pay close attention to the rubric, I repeat again, getting down here, it requires APA format, which means proper spacing, paragraph, all sources cited, and in-text citations. Don't give me a paper without any sources. You should provide some information about the agency, and the agency should be cited. And then there should be a reference page as well, properly formatted. Okay? Many students mess up because they don't do that. And then I put a big announcement anyway in the class. Your discussion involving fieldwork issues, and then describe the issues you come across with your fieldwork, such as how you identified your site or how you prepared your interview responses. What advice would you give to a student that is getting ready for this course? Specifically, incorporate your transferable skills in your fieldwork. How did you do it? What transferable skills were involved? That should be pretty easy. The global skills of communication, ethics, and professional responsibility diversity are inherently interpersonal skills which are best learned in groups. They require community and collaboration. And then the personal skills. Remember, I talked about the 3 that involve personal skills: digital fluency, information literacy, and critical thinking. Okay? And then your live lecture you'll have till Sunday to get all your points to provide me with the key phrase for that. And those are your assignments for the week. In this class, it's pretty straightforward because, again, this is almost, as I repeat again, and I said it from day one, it's like an independent studies course. Of course, so they're working on this class. This is one of the very last classes that I teach. That is 11-week class. They're changing them all to 5.5-week classes in future quarters. So we're going to talk about these 3 bullet points in just a few minutes. And again, these are your assignments. Okay. So how do you gain real world experience? Well, you could gain real world experience a number of ways. For example, some of you did what I am doing, right? What I did to gain my real world experience. I knew I wanted to become a lawyer, so I got a job in a big law firm. Now, I started in the mailroom as a messenger. And when I was in that position, I did everything to make it clear to the individuals that I met at the law firm that I was going to become a lawyer. And I would pay attention to things that they were saying. I would notice the mail that was coming in. I would also find myself sometimes just engaging in conversations with the individuals about what they actually do. And they were willing to do it because they saw that I was taking time to learn. I took my job and turned it to an extension of the classroom. And I began to see not what the book was saying about lawyers and attorneys, but I began to see what I need, what I could do from them, pick their brains, so to speak. Now, I didn't get in the way of what they were doing. And so eventually what happened is that that got my foot in the door. And there are other ways that you can get your foot in the door, such as field reports, such as internships, externships, where while you're in school, you go and you work within the organization, assisting the individuals in the field that you have a desire to work when you become a professional. You could find yourself volunteering in the community to work within the organization, to help out in the organization, in the field. And you would be gaining real-world experience. Also, at the same time, you would be building a resume. Also, at the same time, you would be creating contacts that are necessary to be able to get employed. And we've talked about that, and I will talk about that some more in the weeks to come. So it is important that you utilize your working experience. Now, the next thing that happened because of the way that I processed things was that the law firm saw that I was serious about it, wasn't just there just to be a gopher, and that I actually was on a mission, and I felt like I was in the classroom when I was at work, but I was getting paid. Not very much, but the key thing is that I was learning from professionals because they were sharing with me what exactly they were doing. So then I became a file clerk. So as a result of that, I began to have access to documents and papers that were previously in envelopes and sealed when I would deliver them as a messenger. But now in the file department, I'd file away their letters, their correspondence between clients and other individuals. I would file away court documents such as motions, briefs, and things like this. And so I took that opportunity to learn about the companies that they represented. Once again, I am preparing myself for my professional experience to see how lawyers operate and actually work within the various companies that they represent. And then a real door opener came for me because they thought about me when something happened to the law librarian, and they approached me and gave me the job. And I became the law librarian. Now, the role of law librarian at that time was to be the custodian of the books. That is, that you would file the books away when the lawyers were through. You would then also keep their, they had some what they call subscription services for each week. There were pages coming in, and you would take some of the pages out, put the pages in, and update it. And those were the things that you did. As new editions of publications came, you would add those to the shelf. And then you would still not do away with the outdated ones because sometimes they would be utilized. You learned about the sources that lawyers use for research, such as I learned about the reporters or the books that contain the actual cases from the appellate court or the Court of Appeals, and from the United States District Court, and from the United States Supreme Court. So I became familiar with those publications. Once again, I'm gaining professional experience because those were the tools that are utilized by the lawyers. And then finally, I reached the stage where I would sit in the library and I would just listen to the lawyers as they were discussing points of law, as they were discussing how they began, how they thought about arriving at conclusions, because they worked in teams. And contrary to what you would hear in like the public library, there was no talking. There was talking in the law library because they were discussing what area that they were going to work on in a particular case. And so because of that, I also decided to do something else. I said, I want to learn how to research. This was something that I decided, but the opportunity was given to me, people, because I was working there and I was working with the materials that they did. And so I decided to study it myself. I took some of the things home sometimes and I read them at home. I did like homework assignments. I found pamphlets that were in the library as to how to do what we call shepherdize a case, to determine what cases were up to date. Now, keep in mind, this was pre-electronic research. This was manual research, and we used the publications themselves. And I became familiar with these sources because as a librarian, I'd also had to go to the library, law library, which in this case happened to be across the street from the law office I was in, and the county library. And I had a library card, and I would go and check out materials for the lawyers. But you also should be aware I checked out materials for myself. So I began utilizing it and reading these things. Keep in mind, I was doing my work. And then finally, the last part was I took the opportunity in the job to teach myself how to write. I already knew how to write, but to write in legalese, how to write memos, and what they meant by a brief. What was the proper outline for a briefing? Those of you who take my constitutional law course will learn about briefing a case. That's in the Bachelor Completer program that I teach that as well. And so I taught myself how to do all of this. So it came to a head one day when one of the lawyers and two of the lawyers were talking about their point of law, and they said they were going to, pull the cases that they needed on that point of law when they came back from lunch. And they were operating in a in a level where they were determining what's the best way for them to find what they did. So I figured it out. So I went and I used the systems that I learned about. It was called the Key West system, where the books were, it's like a cross-reference system that was used by West Publication. Not Commerce Clearinghouse, but Lawyers Cooperative was another publication that had a method that they used for researching cases as well. I learned about the encyclopedias Corpus Juris and Corpus Juris Secundum. Corpus Juris, which means body of law. Corpus Juris Secundum was the second body of law. And so I learned how they would cross-refer these things and to find cases. So the bottom line was, during my lunch hour, I sacrificed eating that day. I may have sat at my desk and ate, but I did that entire hour take the time to pull cases that fit within that point of law, stack them up on a table as the lawyers actually would do, as I'd seen, because I'd have to file them away. Left the books open and I'd tear off of a legal pad and put in as a bookmark. And then I put on top of that roughly 10 books that I had, do not disturb. And that was how the lawyers would leave stuff there until I would file it away. So the lawyers come in and they say to me that they can't find any of the cases on point, that they're empty from the shelf. So what happened is that I said, come with me. And I took them to a corner in the library. And I said, those are the books right there I think you're looking for. Would you like to take a look? And they looked. The first one, said, yeah, this is it. This is one of them. And then the next one, and the next one. And they said, wait a minute. Who did this? I did this, I told them. They said, so you properly did a process called shepherdizing to make sure that these were the most recent precedents for the cases, and that was good law to use. And I said, yes, I did. I said, and I used the Key West system to find the key for the point of law that you guys have been discussing. And they said, come with me, and took me to one of the big bosses, and he said, I remember one of the guys said, we're wasting our money with this kid here as a law librarian. I said, what do you mean? He's not doing the work? Yes, he's doing the work. But this kid also, and then I began to show them some samples of some things that I had written myself on hypothetical cases in briefing. And they said, oh my God, you know how to research? You know how to write memos? So the lawyer said, well, let's hire him an assistant and let him become, I don't know what to call it. Let's call it a law clerk. And that's what they called it. Today it's called a paralegal. And they said, and so I began working with the lawyers even more. Now, guess what happened after that, guys? I used to go to court, and I would pay attention to what was going on in the courtroom with the lawyers. I went to real estate closings. I learned how they did the documentation and what was taking place there. I went to some what they call corporate acquisition meetings, where there were acquisitions and mergers of companies, and saw how and learned how those operated. I learned about the corporate world extremely well from the standpoint of a lawyer. So what I was doing, guys, I was still in college. I was not in law school. And what I was doing was gaining professional experience. Now, I'm saying all of this to say you too can do the same thing in whatever area that you're in. Ride-alongs, along with volunteering at police departments. I was what they call a police explorer, where we had a meeting with the sergeant of the local district in the area where I was living at that time. I wasn't trying to be a policeman, but I'm just telling you, excuse me, that's how I did it. So you can do ride-alongs and things like that to help you. You can also find yourself going to court and sitting in the courtrooms and learning what's going on in the courtrooms yourselves. But remember what was happening with me. I was learning, and I was going to the courtrooms for specific cases with the attorneys. And I began helping them by researching, and I would be assigned to work with some of the lawyers on points, and they would sit down and they would discuss with themselves what the points were, and I would make notes. Then I would at some point talk with one of the lawyers about what exactly is that we're trying to prove and what we need to do to prove our case. And that's how I became a professional before, listen to me, people, before going to law school. So then after I did get into law school, I gained real world experience again, but I was ahead of myself, is because when you graduate, then you can work in a law firm, usually not after your first year, but after your second year, where you go and you do what we call summer internships, summer associate, and you work in these law firms or agencies and departments. But the key thing is this, people, is that it all started from me getting my foot in the door. So guess what? It opened up the door for me that I became one of the first African-American attorneys in this big Jewish law firm. I didn't stay, but I did have the opportunity. But it all started way back in the mailroom. So what I'm trying to get across to you is you take every opportunity to learn what it is that people are doing. It wasn't about the money. Trust me, my paychecks that I received when I was a messenger were not very good. But guess what? The experiences that I started to gain from meeting people, including the late founder of McDonald's, Ray Kroc himself, and other CEOs like individuals, and I run across this now with some people now, a company called American Invesco. I learned about how the law firm that I worked for was hired, and this is while I was still in the mailroom, was hired to go to Springfield and lobby for the Condominium Act and the Condominium Act, but it was on behalf of a company called American Invesco, a brother and sister, Nick and Angeline Galatas. People know now who I'm talking about. I most recently, since I retired, was talking to a young lady who was a property manager in the building where I used to live before I moved into our home where we are now. And we started talking, and she was telling me about what she did as many years in working with property. And then she mentioned American Invesco, and I said, oh my God. And then I started telling her what I knew about it and so forth. Her eyes opened up. What I'm trying to get across to you is that this real world professional experience that I gained started when I was a messenger. So it's called getting your foot in the door. Be creative as to how you do it. If you want to be a firefighter, visit the fire departments. Spend some time with the firefighters. And then eventually you might find yourself in a situation where you could follow them and maybe even in some instances ride with them to real fires or dealing with situations. EMTs, emergency people. You begin to do all of these different things, guys. The point of the matter is that it's so important that when I came out of law school, that I knew how to think like a lawyer. I knew the processes, but I had something that a lot of my colleagues did not have, and that was hands-on experience that I had gained for those many years. So you can take that and transfer that into whatever area that you want to work in. Looking at your field reports, some of you want to work in halfway houses. Some of you want to work in and become probation officers, parole officers. Some of you want to be correction officers. You can volunteer to help out. There are all kinds of programs and ways that this does. So you gain your real world experience this way. Now, when we deal with the second bullet point here, it kind of overlaps your progress towards your fieldwork experience. Now, as you recall from week 1, you were told to, and I'll go back and I'll pull it up. In the lesson content, field work component. And we talked about this. And in the field work component, you were to complete 10 hours with an approved agency, okay? And that the experience documented and submitted as your final project. The fieldwork experience is important as you complete this program to give you experience in your field of study. This is another way for you to gain real-world experience. So the fieldwork component in this class is a formulated method that gives you, that's why I said independent studies. It gives you a chance to get moving in the area that you hope to work in after you graduate. So with these 10 hours, you would have the opportunity to shadow a professional, which is kind of like what I did. And you could do that yourself and gain real-world experience. And then we talk about how the fieldwork does not only allow you to experience the professional world of criminal justice on a first-hand basis, not read it in a book, not see a video, but it also allows you to make professional connections. And that's the key. We were talking about that. So that in a point in time, I have a young man who took this course, but I've had him for other classes. And then most recently, I saw him when he graduated from Rasmussen with his associates. He's now in the bachelor program. And he ended up doing a ride-along for his project with the local police department, where that local police department connected with him and he connected with them. And as a result, they encouraged him to apply for a position as community service officer, CSO, where he didn't carry a weapon or gun, but he drove around in a police car that said community service officer and helped with non-emergency type situations. And he worked with them. And eventually, they said, you know what, you would make a good officer. But again, that's an example of what one student did with their fieldwork component in the class. And so as of today, this individual now has a part-time job as a police officer as he continues to finish what he is learning in school. The point of the matter is that he took the opportunity with his field report to turn it into a introduction to a possible job. Now, that doesn't mean that he has to stay with that department. What it does is it builds his resume, and it also gives him some references from these individuals as to how he performs. So in our field report component, we told you what you needed to do in step 1. Field of observation in a police department, which is what this young man did, a ride along, some interviews, or shadow a professional through the 10-hour period, a halfway house to observe caseworkers managing release offenders, a court proceeding. I used to love to do that, to examine the fast-paced nature of the adjudication and correction process. And so these are just some of the things involved. And the point of the matter is this is what you had to do. And then step 2, contact the agency that you decided by letter or phone, because you're doing this professionally. And remember, you are preparing yourself, utilizing your transferable skills of communication, written and oral communication. You're dealing with working with various individuals from various backgrounds. You're working in teams. And so all the transferable skills. So you're professional, and then it tells you what you're supposed to do in step 3, and then it tells you to pay attention to what you're doing, take notes as you do what you do, and then we're talking about this is a professional opportunity. Dress to impress. Don't go there like you're hanging out. You're not hanging out with the police officers. You want to be there, and you learn. And you're also representing the program as well. And so then in your final report, this is what it's going to be, a 2 to 3. Believe it or not, see, it's not really a lot. What we're focusing on is not your report, but we're focusing on the experience that you gain operating in the field. And so the first one was week 5. Some of you fumbled the ball, and then now you have one coming up in week 8, and then your final report will be due week 9. So from week 5 to 8, you should have more information, not just the same old stuff there. So let's go back to where we were. So the field work experience component of it. Remember what we said in the progress report assignment. Let me go back a minute so you can see what I'm talking about, just to refresh your memory. In the field work progress report, it says that you're going to deal with the issue of the things that I just talked about, your real world experience. But notice your discussion assignment for the week helps you with how did you incorporate your transferable skills. Remember the transferable skills globally of communication, ethics, and professional responsibility, and diversity and teamwork. These are skills that you're demonstrating in your field reports. And then the personal skills of digital fluency, information literacy, and critical thinking are also practiced and obtained from your field report as well. So the point of the matter is that when it comes to getting this done, you're going to, I've already told you how the progress works toward your work experience, and the issues and transferable skills that were encountered within the field work. Begin to look through the eyes of the 6 transferable skills in each and everything that you're doing in this field report. Now, when you develop that style, what you're doing is you're putting yourself in a position where you are finding yourselves developing a way to think, to process. And guess what will happen? When you do actually become a professional, you will naturally apply those transferable skills. You won't even be thinking about it. As I've said from day one of the most important skills that criminal justice professionals have is written and oral communication, because your statements, you end up testifying in real cases, you end up submitting your reports, and they're utilized as exhibits and as evidence in real cases as well. Okay? And then your relationship that you establish in the area that you work with the community as a whole, dealing with ethnic groups of backgrounds that are different from yours. That's diversity. Working with detectives, working with forensic people, working with attorneys, defense as prosecution, investigators, also dealing with medical professionals, dealing with coroners and medical examiners. You learn the value of these things in terms of working within the criminal field. So it's real important for you to understand the importance of each of these. And then, of course, you learn how to use credible information, reliable sources, and also you have to be able to think on your feet. You have to be able to be creative. They don't want cookie cutter people. Bring some new stuff to the team, and it's all for team. Remember, though, there's no I in team. You work together to reach a conclusion. And that's what happened oftentimes with the lawyers, is that in the big law firms, they would have individuals and they would have meetings and they would sit down and they would discuss whatever assignments that they had with their points of law, and they would see how it applied to the facts of what the case that they specifically were dealing with. It's the same kind of thing you're doing when you're trying to solve a crime or something of that nature. So it goes all the way across the board to every aspect of criminal justice. And so I'm going to adjourn the session tonight, and I'm going to talk about what you have to do in terms of the key phrase. And the key phrase for tonight is professional experience. That's what you're going to give me tonight to get your points. I will see you in a couple of weeks. I will, within the next week or so, or a few days, receive the information about the ACAT that I'll be sharing with you. Remember, there are going to be 2 tests you're going to take. There's going to be one in week 9, and that one in week 9 will actually be graded. It's 100 questions. And then in week 10, you will have the ACAT, which it is a self-assessment. And here's what you will discover, is that they're going to be evaluating how well that you did in the program, because you're ready to exit and receive your first degree. And hopefully we'll continue on to your second degree. So with that, I'm going to say good night to you, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Good night.